Okay. All right. Well, I'll start by just very brief introduction of what this workshop is about, and I'll leave it to Sahar to introduce everyone. But thank you all for coming. My name is Ray Galinsky. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the interim dean of institutional effectiveness, which oversees assessment and institutional research and accreditation and a number of other things. This workshop is part of the sponsored by the Assessment Council. So most of you, I think, are familiar with the Assessment Council, but for those of you who are not, the Assessment Council has been in existence for a long time at BCC. And it's chaired currently by me, essentially. That will be changing soon. Well, Sahar will become the new chair of the council shortly. But the council's role is to advocate for assessment across campus. And one of the ways we do this is by offering professional development workshops. So the series that we're having this fall will be focused on online assessment, which is, of course, is a big topic for all of us over the past several years. So with that, I just want to thank you again for coming. And I think you're in for a treat. You have 4 very distinguished speakers who really are going to wow you with what they do. So with that, Sahara, please go ahead and introduce the speakers.
Sure. As many of you know, my name is Sarah Tamturktur. I've been involved in assessment for so many years. And as also Ray just mentioned, this is part of the 3 fall workshop series dedicated to promoting assessment of online teaching and learning. And thanks for joining us for this discussion with our distinguished faculty who will be sharing their personal experiences and insights and how they implemented their diverse teaching and learning strategies into synchronous and asynchronous class environments. So basically today's topic will be, the title is Sharing Online Teaching and Learning Practices in Synchronous and Asynchronous Classes, and our distinguished speakers are, in the alphabetical order, Professor Shaila Karaju from Department of Biological Sciences, then Professor Silvia Carlo Rossi, Department of World Languages and Cultures, Professor Jordi Getman Erazo, Department of History, and Professor George Pachoros, Department of Engineering, Physics, and Technology. So each will have about close to 15 minutes, maybe a little bit over. And please hold off your questions till the end. So we're going to have a Q&A session and we can discuss your questions and they could answer your questions in the end. Thank you so much. And without further ado, I'm going to leave it to Shaila.
Hello, everyone. I am going to, let me share my presentation. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Oh, okay, let me try to do a slideshow. Sometimes it doesn't work. Okay, so with online teaching, especially asynchronous, I find that I don't want to come off as a bot. So that just puts my class out there and doesn't get a chance to actually get to know the students. So this has been something I have tried during the pandemic, especially because then you wanted to see the students to keep track of them. So let me first explain how this works in my class strategy. So my class environment, I'm talking about a generalized bio course that is asynchronous. And my classes are designed for mastery learning, which means that students will get unlimited attempts at everything they do. And the class is scaffolded in such a way that it promotes deliberate practice. It means teaching the students the basics and drilling the basics through formative assessment, and then seeing that through into the summative assessment. In the online course, my summative assessment is, apart from doing online exam, it's an oral exam. So let me show you how that works. So when you're learning for mastery, one of the things that's important is deliberate practice, meaning taking a good look at your syllabus to identify the basics in each topic. That's your knowledge, your factual knowledge, and then overlaying the conceptual knowledge, and then the procedural knowledge, which is the application part. So the first thing you do when we are teaching for mastery is to take your topic and break it up, and then focus on the basics so that the students are really strong in the basics. Another important thing with mastery learning is slow learning, so that the students have a low cognitive load, and you scaffold it in such a way that they learn slowly but repeatedly. And when you do that, if you use quizzes, either via apps such as Quizlet or Google or something, or Blackboard quiz, the students get instant feedback in how they're doing, so that they can go back and try it again. With mastery learning, we have unlimited attempts. So the students try and try until they get it right. And I encourage the students to do it. And I tell them I always take their best attempt. So I encourage them to try as many times as possible. And the other very important part of mastery learning, or any online course, as we've seen, is progress tracking, to see how well they're doing. And that seems to be can be a problem, but it can also be a great opportunity to see how the students are doing. The problem is because we don't have a lot of easy ways or apps or software to do progress tracking in a painless way. It's a little hard. It's a bit clunky, going to different places to see how the students are doing. So sometimes I'm still looking for good apps on progress tracking so that I can give the students a quick report much easier. But we'll still work on that. Now, this is an example of my current asynchronous class, which is Bio 22, which is medical terminology. It only has 2 credit hours, so I don't expect the students to, spend huge amounts of time studying, but the idea is to do some smart learning. So the way my weekly homework works, this is the homework wheel. I usually have a weekly homework wheel for the students to see at the beginning of the semester. The first thing the students do is that they take a look at a PowerPoint, but then the formative assessment is that they take a quiz on Quizlet. So they practice that quiz many times. And then I make the actual notes of breaking down every word. I have done it on iPad using GoodNotes. I actually break down every single most important words vocabulary for the week. I break it down and I make the students do the same. And I also draw a little word tree that you see elementary school teachers doing, which is they would have like one root and they would put all the suffixes and everything, or one suffix, and they would have lots of roots in the tree, and then they could actually draw the tree and then create words through that. So that's all part of the sketch notes. They do that. And then they do a deeper learning where there is a long Google worksheet where the students go through and work through they practice all the words that they learned. They have unlimited attempts. Then we have a word play. And the word play is spelling, pronunciation, and deconstruction of vocabulary. This can only be done one-on-one or 2 or 3 students at once if they come in for a weekly check-in. And that's where we do the weekly check-in comes in. So I do a weekly check-in for about 5 minutes with each student. Sometimes it could go to 10 minutes, but allow 10 minutes, but usually we're done in 5 minutes. Sometimes 2 or 3 students will come in at the same time because they all have 12 o'clock, 12:10, 12:20. They might come early or late, and we all work with it together. It's like a little mini class, so mini check-in. We track their progress. They show me their notes that they have written. So I actually give them a grade for that. I also give them, and I've already looked at their other homework and say, yeah, I see you finished this, you haven't finished that. So we go over problems that they're having. And then we practice pronunciation, and they walk me through one tree with a lot of different suffixes and prefixes. We walk through the tree and I give them instant feedback, and it gives them a chance to talk biology. Now, when I'm teaching a Bio 24 or Bio 23 course, which are gateway courses, we do the same weekly check-in. The only difference is that during that time, students come prepared to teach me one concept for the week. So if it's homeostasis, they will teach me homeostasis for the week. And this is where some of the deep learning takes place, where we really look at some uncomfortable places, like, are you having trouble with pronunciation? During the pandemic, I actually figured out that some of the students had speech difficulties. So I had to, I did suggest that they go to the speech class and talk to people in the speech and communication department. They gave me some help who I can send the students to. I think it was Joel. We sent them there so the students can actually work on their speech. If there was, I could actually detect a speech problem. So that's where the weekly check-in comes in. Also, there is the pedagogy of care. A lot of students who take Bio 22 or 23, 24, whatever the class may be, especially 22, you would think it's such a 2-credit-hour course, but the students enjoy coming in for this because they see a live person talking to them and asking them how their week went and how are things going. They sometimes talk about some other class that they're having trouble with, and we would have a little quick chat, ask them how they're doing, ask what's their major. And many of them are students with an e-permit from another school because they already have a degree. So you get to chat with them a little bit. So that's where the pedagogy of care comes in, where we show the students that we care, and we get a lot of e-permit students to biology. I know in other classes as well, and they tell me they come to BCC because they feel that the professors care about them. So I feel like this is something is very important in the weekly check-in. And the weekly check-in also helps with preparing them for the oral exam, which is coming up during the midterm. So when they come to the midterm, they're like, what's the midterm going to be like? Well, it's going to be the same thing, only a little bit longer. It's just going to be 3 trees, not 1 tree. Not even, it might even be the same amount of time, but it's just 3 trees instead of 1 tree, and we're just gonna, wrap up. So I tried that last semester, the oral exam in Bio 22, and the students actually really enjoyed it because they felt like they were able to actually say the words. Some of them said, yes, Professor, I wasn't sure how to pronounce this. So we worked on, things like that and breaking down the vocabulary. So that's all I have. I wanted to keep it as short as possible because and zero in on the weekly check-in for my topic.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shaila. I think this is a great idea. Hopefully, our faculty will be inspired and they will do weekly check-ins and also oral exams like the way you do in your classes. We're going to hold off to our questions till the end. So thank you so much. And next one is Sylvia.
Sure. Can you hear me well? I did unmute myself. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for organizing this workshop. I think that it's a great idea to be here and try to share our ideas in this online environment. Let me start the presentation. Here, slideshow, play from start. I will just share with you some of the strategies that I'm using in my courses, and some of them are very similar to what you're using, Shaila. So very much we are paired very well. We're all here because we're all strong of the fact that no one medium, right, is better than another, but rather the design is what makes a difference. So best practices that may work and that we may want to implement depends sometimes also from the course you're teaching, but there are certain that can be good for everybody. So I might here talk about things that can be very old news from you because everybody already uses them. Great. Maybe I can give you some ideas that would be even better. But again, I would love to keep it not too much theoretical, but mostly focused on tools. And I would love for your feedback and to know what is working in your classes. So tools, for example, that we all use on Blackboard, they're all available on Blackboard and we can use are, of course, wikis, which are some kind of collaborative writing. It works very well for our classes. I'm teaching in the World Language department. So we create one document and all the students and the teacher, the instructors can collaborate in that. Blogs, discussion questions are definitely ideal because they get everybody to talk, and especially in asynchronous classes is the only way in which they engage with each other. PowerPoints, of course, tests, videos, group works, and projects. Those are all tools that are becoming very, very common for any online classes here. Now, another key idea is that the engagement is the key in learning. Instructors need to increase the student affect, their enthusiasm, their sense of belonging, their interest, and cognition. So the deep learning that happens when there is self-regulation. Their behavior, so time and effort, we need to regulate that, their interaction and participation. And how do we do that? With humanizing learning, so creating a relevant content that is meaningful to them, to their lives. And then also a sense of community, again. It's also important to have a good coordination among instructors, especially if you're teaching one section of the same course that other instructors are teaching. And another tool that we are using a lot, at least for Italian, is surveys and a growth mindset approach, where we ask students embrace challenges and remember that you don't need to know everything now, but you will learn everything at the end. So the idea of I'm not good at it doesn't count. I'm not good at it yet. Yes, that works. And of course, engagement goes student to faculty, both ways, student to student, and student to subject. How do we increase, again, engagement student to faculty? One thing that I've been doing since a few years now is sending an intro email before the course starts, welcoming students a few days before. And then online on our Blackboard page, I always have a start here button that can use, again, before the class starts, where they can introduce each other, they can talk maybe in English if they still don't have the language to speak in Italian. So that there is a little bit of warming up, again, before the classes start. And then discussion boards, not only to ask the students to discuss, but also as a tool for the instructors to know what happens. So I always have one discussion board open where all the students can ask questions and where I can respond immediately. So try to provide immediate feedback. And of course, there are online office hours or phone office hours. And you mentioned the weekly check-in. I don't do it weekly, but I try to ask for one-to-one meetings. They have to, students have to sign in for one-to-one meetings so that they, especially in, again, asynchronous classes, they can come and for 10, 15 minutes talk about if they have any challenge, if they're meeting any challenge, so on and so forth. So I feel that this humanization is really important to keep also online. And then, of course, working in small groups. If the class is synchronous, the breakout rooms are definitely the easiest thing to do, but also group projects. I'll tell you a little bit more later about it. Multiple modes of communication, so not only the email, but whatever you can get to talk to the students. And one thing that I do is sending video announcements. I don't know if I can open this. This is actually my current online asynchronous class. Let me see if I can open it immediately. If not, I will share with you later.
You may need to stop sharing this
that's what
PowerPoint and open another one.
I'm trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
more quickly saying it than doing it here. For example, this is my announcement page, and here I just posted, for example, a place for the students to sign up for a one-to-one meeting, and I try here to put video announcements so that they see my face and they click the video and they hear me. And in these videos, like in all the announcements, I always try to reinforce what they already know. So for example, if you're dealing with whatever tense or whatever grammar point, I will talk in Italian about that point and then give the announcement in English so that I'm sure that they know what they're talking about. And in the announcement, I try to remind them what they have to do, what is upcoming, if there is whatever that is happening in the class. So these I try to do at least once a month so that they have my face in the announcement. Then, of course, there are a lot of videos in the course content, so on and so forth, because most of the classes, again, are asynchronous. So that's how I connect with them with the new topics. Now, back to interaction students to students. I mentioned you group projects. If we have time, I will show you one of those. Group projects that they can do and they can work on also with video. So maybe they can use Zoom, of course, to record them and talk to each other, or they can go above and beyond, like some students do, and they use other means of recording. Some group case studies, of course, peer instruction. I try them to pair them so that they can work together. And again, the discussion is always central. So for example, we talked about discussion questions. When we have a discussion question, I always ask students not only to respond, but to engage to one or another student. So at least there is a little bit of discussion coming on. And to me, by the way, in an asynchronous class, this is worth participation grade. So they know that if they don't do it, their participation grade is suffering for it. And then, of course, collaborative brainstorming, peer review, and again, role playing. I don't know, again, if I have time to show you this, but this is an example of a couple of students who were to do a group project. The assignment was very easy. Ask a few questions with a few languages, the little language that you have, and get answers from your peer. They were paired in groups of 3. And of course, there are challenges. You pair them, one doesn't show. So what happens? These 2 students asked another friend to work with them. And again, they were supposed to do it online. Instead, they went on campus, they worked on it, they pinned a joke in it. So you see that if you give them the occasion, they go beyond what they're supposed to do and they enjoy. The thing is that they didn't see as an extra thing, they loved doing it. And that's what I get as a feedback. Oh, sorry, no, let's not hear it. I mean, I showed it to you if you want later on. And then student content. Student content, again, if you are online in a synchronous course, the chat room is the best thing that you can do to give immediate comments. Sometimes I use it also as a Blackboard rather than changing the sharing. Again, use of videos, personal videos, tutorials, quizzes, I should say, reading and video discussions, personal stories. I use a lot of personal stories because, again, I want to make the content real to them. I have to show that the content is real to me as well. So personal stories that I put in the video, connection with my family, I don't have a problem sharing. But I also tell the students, you don't want to share your stories or your family stories, totally fine with me. Make one up, create a fake family. And they do. I had students create a different identity, and they went along with it for the entire course. Connect to a side world, of course, use projects, we talked about it, and most importantly, make material relevant to them. So it is crucial, again, to increase their affect and their enthusiasm in this learning environment. So in order to do that, I try to keep the content as close as possible to their interests and to their identities. So for example, well, we have a multicultural group of students, BCC, more than anywhere else. So it is very much appropriate to do so. I always try to bring their culture into play, even when we talk about Italian culture. So I always try to give them a space to talk about the reality that they have close. And also when I create projects, I tell them you can definitely make them appropriate for your household if it works. A common denominator for all these assignments, in fact, is always to reflect in their own original culture as somehow to compare it with the Italian culture. For example, if you see that the material is all instrumental, you have an instrumental engagement. If you focus on grades, discipline, and certificates, that's as much as you can have. If instead, if you increase self-motivation, this is what you have with an intrinsic engagement. And a last example that I can briefly show you, or again later if you wish, is another project of another student. This is actually final project that I use instead of a final test. We can talk about that later as well, but I feel that with tests, there is so much room for using outside help, let's put it that way, while with projects, they tend to keep it more in line in doing the project themselves. So for example, in this case, the final project was to do a research. So you have a basic research. They had to research their family history through a dish or a food tradition, and then present it. I give a series of questions that they can follow. So there is a moment in which they have to talk about the dish. They have to use the grammar we have been teaching in class. They have to talk about the history of the dish and the ingredients. So they're using the tenses that I want them to use, and then connect it with Italian culture and with and with their own culture. And you will be surprised when you do things like that. You're surprised of the feedback that you have. Again, in this case, the student engaged her whole family into making a dish. She spoke perfectly. No, nobody speaks perfectly at the end, but we want to go beyond the minor mistake, and we want to go instead focusing on the broader learning that is happening here. And again, I have plenty of stories to tell, but I don't want to, oh, sorry, again, excuse me. I don't want to take too much time. A last thing that I want to point the attention on is the use of surveys. I tend to give students surveys 3 times during the semester, beginning, middle, and end, very short, online. I ask 3-4 questions. How are you doing? Are you following the material? Are you doing the homework? Are you coming to class? Things like that. And it's not a matter of what they say, but it's just an occasion for them to think about what's their approach in the class. And I cannot reinforce that. More. It's always very important to remind them that the material can be difficult, yes. Challenging, yes. But they have tools, they have help, they have a lot of outside help that they can use. And if they cannot do that yet, they will at the end. That's about it. Last note, just always try to be present, even if it's an online class, and there are multiple ways of doing so. Thank you so much. I wanted to leave you actually with a question that's for our discussion later. If you can tell me what or how can you make your class material relevant, that is outside my language main teaching, I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Are we going to answer this question in the end, Sylvia?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. I'm going to make my comments later, but this is a great way of raising the sense of belonging for students. But Shaila and you do, and I'm sure we're going to hear more stories from Jordi and George as well. So thank you again. We're gonna hold off to our questions till the end. So now floor is Jordy's.
Thank you, everybody. Let me see. Here comes the fun share part.
George, I think you have to make Jordy a co-host.
Yeah, I can't share so far. It's the story of my life. No sharing. While we're waiting, though, I wanted to point out this is I think this is a trend that you're going to see today. The sort of the bringing together of the human dimension in how we teach, and also I really want to emphasize a concept that's really okay. I still can't share a concept that's really important for historians, but I think that you can see it in the previous two presentations is from Sylvia and Shaila is the notion of context. So what is the context of the student? What is the context of what you're trying to teach? How is it going to impact their lives? So bringing that together, the humanity of it, and the context within which we are teaching, I think is really important. Here we are. Thank you so much, George. Let me see if I can do this right. Can everybody's, are you seeing the presentation?
Yep.
Or is it still in?
It's not in slideshow mode yet.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
not
let me
in
try this.
slideshow mode.
Is it now in slideshow mode?
Yes.
Now,
Okay, good. Here we go. All right. So, I believe it or not, I am also going to do human stuff because even though I'm talking about information literacy in the age of artificial intelligence, so there's an assignment that I'm going to lead up to here, which is really about AI in history. And so just to be quick about this as possible, I do have a lot of slides, so I apologize. I'm just trying to go through them fast. Hopefully that'll make it more interesting. So what is, we've all, since especially last November when ChatGPT appeared on the horizon and really started scaring a lot of academics, all of us probably included at some level, that we've had to grapple with the AI. What is artificial intelligence going to mean to us as educators, to society more broadly, to our students? What is the promise of artificial intelligence? We've been told that it can do so much. There's also the dangers that I just alluded to. What is the reality? It's really interesting to see that ChatGPT now, there's some studies that show that the longer it's been around, the less it knows. So I'm waiting to see what kind of research comes out of that. And what is the future? What is the future of AI in our lives and in our teaching? Let's see, it's not letting me go forward, so I'm going to do this. Okay, so guess what? AI is not it is a technology, but it is not a huge moment in human history, in the sense that there have been a lot of other big moments. I remember when I was a kid, you couldn't use a calculator in math tests. That was like the version of AI that I can remember in my time. But if you look at the screen, the day that TVs and automobiles were invented, or the telephone, that was a huge shift for human society. So we're not new to this. The question is, how are we going to deal with it? How is it going to impact us? On the positive, you can definitely talk about AI informing humanity. It's being utilized, starting to be used in medical, in the medical profession in a way that it can be very useful. Potentially, at least, Google is definitely, and other companies like Microsoft, they're all scrambling to get AI to serve us in the way that as consumers to their products that will keep us paying for that. ChatGPT, I'm going to leave that sitting there. We've all had to struggle with what that might impact, or how it might impact our classes. So the question is back and forth is AI going to be a positive part of evolution, or is it going to be dangerous? I would argue that it's somewhere in between, and that we have to have a conversation. That's why I'm really trying to engage my students in this conversation before they come to think their own maybe misinformed notions of what AI is and how it can impact their lives. But who are we to AI, and what is AI really? It originates with human content, and it is aggregated to create visions and interpretations perhaps of who we are as humans. And so both of these are AI images that have been created by AI. based on information that a human has put into an artificial intelligence software. What do these images reflect? You know, I mean, you can look at the bottom right. You have some old images, right, that look back at the 1800s, but then you'll notice some new technology that has been integrated. So this is something that's very quirky these days. It seems to be really cool to do this, and it's kind of fun.
Jordy, could I just interrupt you briefly? You're breaking up quite a bit in your speech.
Okay.
So
I'm
I don't know
sorry.
if there's an adjustment you can make at all.
Yeah, it tends to happen with sometimes with the sharing. I'm sorry. Let me see if this helps. Is that better?
A little bit.
Okay.
See how-
All right. I apologize. Let me see if I can if I speak slower, does it help? Okay, no, okay, I can't hear you or anyone. I think that you're muted. Anyway, I'll try to go a little slower through this. The question is, what does it produce and how does it show it to us? Here's another example of AI as something that's very quirky these days. What would it be like if historical figures were able to take selfies? Are you able to hear me or not? Is that okay? Is that better? Okay, good. So these are fun. You know, look at that. You even have the crossing of the Dead Sea. You know, what would it be like if you had a selfie there? Cavemen. You know, so it's fun, but I guess, and it's actually very accurate in the sense that the images look real. But what is accurate about what we're seeing, and is this just a thought experiment, or is it starting to influence who we are? And so this kind of makes me think of when I was young and I used to like a lot of new wave music. There was, I don't know if anybody remembers Devo, but they had a song called Are We Not Men? We Are Devo. Anyway, so I'm thinking about all this in my mind as I go through this, because then I started thinking, okay, well, let's look at what AI thinks about the Bronx. So I started doing searches of you know, just the Bronx online, different search engines and AI. And what does it come up with mostly? It comes up with disaster stuff. It comes up with very negative news. Here you have images of fires on the top right. There are a lot of images of the Bronx is burning. You know, so I don't know if that's a trend in AI when it links to the Bronx, but the Bronx is burning dates back to the late 70s. There's a lot of content that gets brought up. And also, here's an image that was pretty prominent too. Ghetto tours, literally called ghetto tours of the South Bronx for tourists from other countries. What does that say about the Bronx, and how is AI, presenting the Bronx to us and to the rest of the world? So then let's turn to history. AI has been very useful in a sense to help us understand how historical figures might have looked. For example, here you have on the left, based on, I think this is Nefertiti, and you have what would she look like in modern day, right? On the other hand, you have something more goofy, like you have what if both Gandhi and Einstein were bodybuilders? And then this is something that I think, looking at history more specifically, that starts to concern me a little more. Everybody has probably seen by now the images of Pope Francis dressed in Balenciaga. Sylvia probably really appreciates this, right? This is very apropos for the Pope to be seen in this dress. But then also, and by the way, that is AI, right? That is an AI created image. But then you also have these other AI created images of Trump when he was brought into court, of him trying to resist arrest. And so there are these images that have been created also by AI that are out on the web. The question is, what impact is that having on our understanding of our president, and how will we look at, if we can keep adulterating, in a sense, real pictures, what does it mean to, and how is it going to influence our understanding of history and our society? So, you know, for example, you know, what is real here? This is the question I'm asking. Balenciaga on the left, or the actual picture of the Pope on the right? Another thing that's come up recently is that AI now is able to produce images of hands, which used to be one of the issues that you could really spot AI in. AI is able to come up with images of hands that look very realistic. So, but we now have to engage. We're forced to engage this notion of information literacy in this period of AI. Can you hear me, or did I break up again? Okay.
Jordi,
so-
sorry, somebody suggested that you may turn off your camera for better sound quality.
That's a good idea. Let me do that. Let's see if I can actually get to my camera now. Here.
I think, yeah, you're frozen now.
Camera might be acting as his microphone as well.
Yeah,
Are you still with us, Jordi? Did we lose you?
No,
I
it
think
looks
we-
like his computer
His
is
slider
frozen.
there, so he's still connected somehow. But maybe that's frozen too, I'm not sure.
Or maybe AI generated artifact.
He may come back. I don't know.
We need a bake sale so our director of online teaching has better connectivity.
Mhm.
Might be the weather.
Yeah, it is the weather, I guess.
Very good
But this
possibility.
is very interesting, right? I was talking about this with one of my colleagues the other day. This is so unreal.
Is this AI, right?
Yeah, the AI and the pictures, photos generated by AI. I mean, we could be in trouble later in future.
They even have those videos where, depending on what you want them to say, it can look like they use
Yes.
video and then reconstitute it to make it look
And
like.
they've been
saying
using this, some of the scammers, they've been using this to call parents. And they play, did you hear about this? They play your kid's sound, like voice, and begging like, "Mommy, they kidnapped me. Do you have to pay?
my
You have to
gosh.
pay this much money?" And yeah, it's been
So,
happening.
yeah, I was
Get
much
that safe
more
word
like
with
that
your kid. Make a safe word with your kid.
safe word. That's what I was going to say.
Yes.
A code word that
Yes, you have to
only
come up with
the
like
family knows.
exactly a safe word. And if you hear that, yes, it's
Oh
really
my
out.
gosh.
Yes, I've been hearing a lot of these things, reading about these things as well.
Stuff we used to do years ago. I can't remember why, but yeah, the safe word.
Oh,
Well,
really?
if they say, "Oh, Lexi, your mama Elise said that I should come pick you up from school," and you're like, I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Then you say, "What's
that's
the
what it
safe-"
was. You're right, Eva. It was the child safety stuff.
And what about you make an enemy in the future and he or she hates you and come up with a video about you and put it online?
Yeah, like
That's
There was-
possible.
revenge porn.
Recently, I
Revenge,
read
yes.
about a school where middle schoolers, boys used, presumably, some kids used AI to create topless images of girls in their grade,
Mhm.
distributed them.
That's revenge porn, and they're underage.
It-
So
absolutely.
it's also trafficking. So yeah. Mhm.
Well, but also the
Even
people
college is
are also
closing.
underage.
Why?
Well, they mean
Flooding.
college is closing for the
Flooding.
weather, right? It's not
Yeah,
like
flooding,
closed
yeah.
weather.
yeah, yeah.
Ah,
Not permanently,
I mean, if
no.
Lehman is closing, we're screwed.
Where are we going to send everyone? We keep them.
That's right. We're going to have to expand our programs, definitely.
Okay, let's wait for a few more minutes. Hopefully you'll be able to come back. If not, George maybe could start and Jordi can continue after he comes back.
Speaking of the
What do you
weather,
like?
just one thing is like we should make sure that we and our students are all signed up for all the CUNY alerts. I mean, I know we're all have PTSD about the heat,
Mhm.
but there's also nature.
Oh, Jordy's trying to come back.
Oh, good.
Oh, okay, good. I see.
Let him in.
Yeah. All right, good.
He's in.
He's coming.
Hopefully he'll have a better connection this
All
time.
right.
Hi, Jordi.
Yay.
Keep your camera off.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know what it's the sharing that's really a problem here. Let me try again.
You
Yeah.
sound a lot better.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. I'm so sorry. I can't share again. Could somebody activate me?
George, because I tried, I
Yep,
can't do
I'll
it.
do it. Let's see. And voila.
Okay, let's see here.
There you go.
Okay.
It says that I'm still. Oh, here we go. Okay.
There you go.
So sorry. I apologize for that. Okay, is that better? Can you see it?
Yeah, yeah, you sound better.
Sound better. And
Okay.
yes.
So. Okay, you seeing the presentation?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So here, so I'm going to go really quick now. So the question is, we all have the responsibility of engaging in information literacy now. It is in our realm. It is in our everyday life. We have to be cautious of what it is that we're seeing. And I've been using images a lot, so because that's the one element of media that is direct. You don't have to necessarily have anybody, Sylvia was talking about language. We don't have to translate this necessarily. It immediately impacts us. So I would argue, though, that it is the similar reality with what we do as academics. We have to be careful in evaluating how AI is impacting our disciplines and how we teach and how our students learn and how they absorb the content that they are receiving. So then I thought to myself, okay, how do I bring this into a history class? Historians are really concerned about how AI might misinterpret historical fact, right? So I came, this is a sort of a thought process that I went through this summer, and I started wondering, like, how can we identify AI generated content in our student work, right? That's our first concern. We've all been talking about that, but then how is that AI content different, though, from what a human might create, or what we might write ourselves, or what our students might write if they actually had if they didn't have the influence of AI. And then I thought, how can I design a history assignment that would actually ask, instead of avoiding AI, actually bring AI into the classroom and say, how can we look at AI versus human produced content? And how does that impact our interpretation of history as a discipline and also factually? By the way, this is one of the first images that I'm showing you right now of Winston Churchill that is not AI generated. That's actually a real picture of him. So in history, and this goes back to the notion that I was bringing up earlier, context is really important. It's not just facts. People think that we're just about dates and people, but reality in history as an analysis, as a discipline, is that we really we consider not just the fact, but the historical context. What were the interpretational, or sort of what is the interpretational context? What were the motivations? How do we look at the impact of an event, of what somebody said? And what kind of narratives get developed to explain what happened in the past? Because we're not just looking at facts. This is not just data. We assemble that data into a narrative, and that's what history is all about. So I built an assignment that I'm testing for the first time this semester, in which you have students ask, the objective is for them to think about not just go to AI and ask what AI would say about a specific historical topic, but actually compare that to what humans have produced. And so the idea behind this is that students, instead of thinking that they're cheating, they can engage AI as part of a larger conversation of the development of those historical narratives. So how does this work? Well, first of all, this is scaffolded, just like Sophia and Charlotte have been talking about. There's some background research that students have to do. They have to pick a topic that is tied usually to a primary source that we've looked at in the course, modern world history. And then they have to conduct background research of human-generated content. So they have to find at least 3 sources that have been produced by humans that interpret that event. And I'll get to that in a second. They have to then assemble those interpretations. They then go on and, probably using ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT to interpret that same question and see what it comes up with. What type of narrative does ChatGPT produce related to that historical event? How does it interpret? And then we go on to step 3, in which students will compare and evaluate the difference between the 3 human-generated responses and the AI-generated interpretation. So what do I ask them to look for? Let's look for accuracy, biases, and interpretations that are embedded in these writings. because what you get from ChatGPT or what you get from humans, there is question mark an intentionality behind it. Certainly with human written historical content, but the question is, how does ChatGPT produce historical content? Is there a bias there? Does it reflect human biases? And how can we interpret those so that we can really be smart about evaluating whether, from the point of view of information literacy, evaluating whether that's actually factual and how helpful it might be. So then that's where we go into the ethical implications. That's step 4. So how that question that I just asked about how AI is influencing the narratives, is it a positive thing? Is it negative? Is it all that different? Is it useful? And then I have students conclude and reflect back on what it is that they've learned. They have to summarize their findings and reflect on the overall impact of AI on historical research. Like I said, this is the first semester I'm doing this. On the one hand, I'm a little afraid. On the other hand, I'm a little excited to see what comes out of this. An example would be, for example, I did this myself just to test out the assignment. Analyze the human and AI interpretations of Winston Churchill's Iron Curtain speech, 1946. This is a very famous speech in which basically the notion of the Cold War is developed. And so I looked at these are not really all that academic, these sources, but I kind of wanted to see the type of source that impacts our knowledge more broadly as a society. And then I brought in ChatGPT. The interesting thing, I won't get into it too much, but is that ChatGPT tends to produce drab analysis. That's what I would call it. It gives you generally accurate, broad interpretations that are kind of assembled. It really feels like an assemblage of a lot of elements that we might find in human interpretations. So the question is, how is that impacting a notion of narrative? Is it actually contributing to a narrative that humans have developed? Or is it, and I would say from my own experience, that it kind of leaves you in a sort of a gray zone. It doesn't really bring forth narratives. It doesn't differentiate between narratives. And it just gives you sort of a jumbled together assemblage of all of the narratives. So the question then becomes, how can this be useful? It's generally useful in the way that I would say that Wikipedia used to be useful when we first encountered it. It's a good place to start, as I tell my students, but it doesn't get us deep down into being able to tell what narratives might be informed by political views that might not be all that acceptable in society. It's really interesting. Like if you put issues related to Trump into this and run the same the same type of assignment, I think it would bring up some really interesting questions about how to interpret someone so polarizing as Trump. It would be a not so polarizing interpretation, which doesn't really give you a real image of what is going on in the country today politically. So I'm not going to get into the assessment in the interest of the time, but you can kind of imagine what I'm looking for. On the one hand, the accuracy and the depth of insightfulness of the comparisons that students engage in. But really overall, I'm looking at their critical thinking skills and how I might be helping them develop those when they look at documents moving forward. So I'm just going to end right here. I thought you might appreciate another image of Pope Francis, really getting down with it. And I just want to open this up for when we get to the questions. What are your thoughts on it? All right, so I'll stop there. And I apologize for what happened earlier with the connection. And let me stop sharing.
Thank you so much, George. This was really, really interesting, and I'm sure we're going to have more discussions on this after George completes his part. So, floor is yours, George.
Is everyone seeing the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, let me see. I don't see you guys. Let me see if I can find you. I like to see my audience. All right. I think we got it. Well, thank you everybody for coming today. My name is George Pachoris. I'm an assistant professor with the Engineering, Physics, and Technology Department. I have also been the assessment coordinator for the department since 2017. Today, I am here to talk about using formative assessment to maintain the integrity of online synchronous courses. This was an interesting topic for me because it really hit home. And to bring some context into this, hopefully relatively short presentation, I want to bring everyone back in time a little bit. The day was March 12th, I believe. The year was 2020. Does anybody have any idea what the significance of that day was as far as CUNY was concerned?
That day we had our last assessment council meeting, and then right after we got the announcement. I remember clearly.
That's exactly right. That was the day that we received communication from CUNY that basically we had 5 days to figure out how to move all courses that were once in person to an online modality. That got pretty crazy. There was a lot of things. There was a lot of things going on there. Does anyone know? And I spoke to Chris FMU the other day about this. Does anybody know on that particular day, the percentage of courses offered at Bronx Community College that were completely online at that time?
Albert Robertson could give you that information easily, I bet.
Yeah, no, I found it because when I was preparing for this presentation, I was like, you know what, that might be a cool thing to talk about. The answer is 3%.
It was very low.
3% of all courses at Bronx Community College were online at the time. And CUNY gave us 5 days to get the other 97% of those courses online. Now, I can, you know what, if you were really quiet, you could probably hear Albert and Delwar's head exploding over in IT about what they knew was coming down the pipe on that one. It was pretty crazy. There's going to be bandwidth issues. There's going to be staff and faculty that don't know how to use Blackboard, me being one of them at the time. And Elise, thank you so much for your help. You were my guiding light as far as as far as Blackboard goes. So thank you so much. I'm glad
you're a phenomenal learner. I still don't understand what you teach.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
but yeah, so one of the things that I figured was, all of my classes, being an automotive instructor, all of my classes are certainly in person. How am I going to translate this into an online modality? Now, I knew that there was going to be massive changes, but at the time, I wasn't exactly sure what kind of changes that were going to be made. So after getting into about 2 weeks of this, things started to become a little bit more clear. And that's why I started moving from a formative assessment, or rather from a summative type of assessment to a formative type assessment. And I'm going to explain to you how that actually changed my life, so to speak. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this presentation, although very short, I did divide it into 2 separate parts. The first part is the formative transition, why I moved from a summative to a more formative modality of assessment. And the second part is the perceived results. Now, I chose the word perceived very intentionally, because admittedly, there is not a lot of scientific data involved with this particular presentation right now, but the perception is reality. And I think as far as educators go, I think that plays a pretty large role in how we conduct our classes and how things kind of shape up for us. We kind of evaluate the class on the fly and see how we can modify our instruction to better suit the students. So the perceived results, although not totally scientific, what I want to do is I just want to show you my perception of how things went and how I took this form not only from the transition into online, but now back into in-person as well. So what is formative assessment? Okay, as opposed to summative assessment. Now, on this slide, I chose to use this definition because it's more of a functional way of looking at formative assessment. It's not, I'm sure there's an academic, a more accurate academic definition of formative assessment, but what I like seeing is the ongoing procedure of student assessment that provides feedback throughout the learning process. And that I kind of like to think of it that way, as opposed to what summative is, which is, students will learn, over a series of time, maybe a couple of days, maybe a week or so, and then all of that knowledge is tested at the very end in some kind of unit test, midterm, final, whatever it may be. Okay, so so what am I talking about here? How is this maintaining any type of integrity? All right, so why the transition? I needed to make sure that testing and my overall course maintained its integrity. And the reason I did this was because within the first 2 weeks of me teaching my first class, I did realize that I now have a bunch of students that are completely unmonitored, sitting in a room that probably has every conceivable resource they could possibly find. So testing these students, the results of these tests would have very little value, if anything at all. It would not be an accurate assessment. So I had to figure out a way, not that I'm pioneering this idea, but I had to figure out a way for myself to make sure that the integrity of the course and the material was being upheld. All right. So ultimately, what I decided to do was devalue anything that maybe poor ethics could infiltrate. All right. Now I understand I went into this with a negative light. I'm usually a guy that's the glass is half full. But this time I went into this going, you know what? There's a negative here that I'm trying to fix. What actually happened was throughout all of COVID and now into, current day, I feel that all of the techniques that I used during the forced online modality actually bled over, and there are many, many positive things that came out of this. And I'd like to highlight and showcase some of those right now. Okay, so how did I do this? I am implementing the new strategy. The first thing was, you have to remember that I am teaching, at this point, all of my classes were online synchronous. So we were live on Zoom or Collaborate, depending on, which semester we were talking about. But under normal circumstances, when I was in an in-person modality, lecture notes, attendance, class participation, these types of things were a little bit more benign. They did not stand out in the whole scheme of things as far as their ultimate grade, okay? And one of the things that I changed drastically was that I made these lecture notes, these attendance and class participation, an important quantitative assessment. I went from these things not being as important to these things being much more important. And the way that I did that was I required my students to upload anything they did in that particular course or that particular day, that class, at the end of class. So I know, Shyla, I know you were talking about weekly formative assessment. I was actually doing it daily. Everything that was done in class, whether it be lecture notes, whether it be simulated lab assignments, whether it be I was even keeping track of class participation rudimentary by checking names off as they were asking good questions. All of this kind of played a role in their daily activity, and that daily activity was evaluated by their daily uploads. Every class, they would upload anything that they had, and it would count as an assignment. Now, how did I weight this? The daily activity, I weighted at roughly 75% of their final average, whereas only leaving 25% of their final average for unit tests. Now, there seems to be a big disparity between these two numbers, all right? How could I possibly weight tests that little and daily activity that much? Well, why were each of these weighted so differently? Let me give you an example of what I ran into, and it kind of demonstrate the necessity of how I went about this. You could take student number one. Student number one would come into class and would ask great questions. They would be on time. They would take proper notes. They were very respectful towards their coworkers or their colleagues. But let's say this student wasn't really good at test taking, okay? Had a problem, needed some type of remediation. Well, you have to remember, testing at this point in time when we were online, really didn't make all that much of a difference to me anyway, because there was no integrity with these tests. I could not monitor anything. So what I decided to do was their daily activity, which I was able to monitor through Zoom, I was able to weight that at 75%. So in essence, what happens to student number one is they were rewarded for coming in on time, taking the proper notes. In order to take proper notes, they had to ask proper questions to make sure their notes were accurate, because they know once they uploaded all of this stuff, I would be evaluating anything that we did that day. If it was note-taking, I would literally read through those notes and evaluate the quality of the notes. Now, I gave them examples of what I was looking for and all that kind of stuff, so that's, that's fine. But it really allowed a student that was doing everything right every single day to not do so well on tests and still pass the course, as opposed to student number two. Student number two is probably a student that we've all had at some point. It's a student that may come in late, may be very quiet, may be almost catatonic in class, but is very, very bright and would be able to go and take a test and pass it very easily. So now that student would have a harder time in my class, because if they ignored all of the daily activity where all of the learning takes place and just concentrated on the tests, they couldn't pass the class. Okay. So I think what happened was I devalued everything that they could kind of be, I put poor ethics in quotes, but anything that they could cheat on, so to speak, because of all of the unchecked resources that they had at their disposal, I kind of devalued it and rewarded all of the daily participation and everything else a much bigger part of their grade. So survey says, how did this all turn out for me? Well, there was a lot more. I chose the top 5 that kind of rolled off the top of my head, but there were a couple of more that were notable. The first one, student engagement and motivation increased dramatically. That is by far the most noticeable change that I saw. If they knew they were getting evaluated every day, and you have to remember, it's kind of low stakes evaluation. Note taking, this is not some big to do, but collectively it made a big impact. So the student engagement, making sure that they got to class on time because they wanted to make sure they didn't miss anything because it would affect their grade, asking good questions. The whole gamut was really good. So student engagement, motivation increased dramatically, definitely the most notable thing that I have seen. The second thing that I thought of was students received targeted feedback. I didn't know how else to say that. Targeted feedback may actually be the correct term, but maybe not. But targeted feedback to me was, since I am evaluating, microscopically, so to speak, on a daily basis, I can now give them direct feedback. I wouldn't be issuing some general class feedback of how everyone did, but it would be very specific to the work that they turned in, which was really good. So the students really enjoyed that. The next one, real-time insight to student comprehension. This one was the biggest one for me. What would happen, and I wouldn't say quite often, but often enough, when I would be reading through, let's say, some students' notes that they took for the day, I would read through their notes and notice that the notes were not correct. They may have misinterpreted what I have said. They may have misheard, and I would be able to address it right then and there, so they would not continue on with the misinformation. Now, if 1 or 2 students had some of these issues, I would address it with them. It also showed that if a majority of the class had an issue, there was a problem with me. So I would immediately know that I would have to go back into class and say, hey guys, listen, we talked about this particular topic or this particular theory or calculation. I may not have explained it properly. Let's go through this one again. So it kind of gave a great feedback for myself. The next one, establishes a cycle of continuous improvement. Again, I didn't really know exactly how to word that, but what happens is, as I am grading and getting their targeted feedback to them, we are continuously improving. All right, it's almost like no student left behind. If improvement keeps moving, then their their self-awareness, their everything about the experience is a more positive one, and it promotes the future growth and continuing on, which really worked out pretty well. Lastly, a stress-free learning, question mark, question mark. This is purely speculative at this point, but after, through my observations and through some of the students that I spoke with, they really appreciated the fact that their daily activity was being monitored closer, and not to rely on some test that that they may have been studying wrong for the last 3 weeks, only to find out that they didn't know the material the way they should have. So when I say stress-free learning, what I'm actually referring to is the fact that they're not concentrating and putting so much emphasis on 2 or 3 actual assessments, but rather than the importance of every day being equal. I remember when I was in college, and I admit it myself, there was a lot of classes that you did little until the midterm, and then you crammed it all in. That's not the best way of education. We all know that at this point. So I kind of reflect on that, humorously, and try to nip that in the bud before it can actually happen. So I think those are some of the outcomes that I have seen by using a formative assessment, something that is being evaluated on a daily basis, rather than something that like a unit test or a midterm or a final, which they still do get, but is weighted a little bit less. Conclusion. Not everything that came out of COVID was bad. I refused to go through 2 years of online teaching, only to have it throw everything that I've learned about that all the way out, just to come back in person. A lot of the techniques that I used online, I am still using today. In fact, some of them are very silly. I've built a studio. I have cameras that are facing everywhere. If this was on my desk here, I don't even know if you can see that, but I can switch very quickly back and forth to what I'm doing on my desk. So not everything that came out of COVID was bad. We did learn some things. The second one, my transition to formative assessment was born out of necessity, but continues through proven success. I think I did a pretty good job explaining that just in the last couple of minutes. And the last was the online modality of instruction is increasing all across academia and beyond. We're proof of it right now. The majority of people who signed up for this particular workshop actually signed up as an online, event. So we're really moving forward with this online instruction, and it's increasing very, very quickly. In fact, Jordy, your new position, I don't even think existed before COVID. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Right. So we see the push. We definitely see the push. So that is kind of how I surmise using formative assessment to kind of keep the integrity of what I do in the classroom. I did have any questions, but we will save those questions for the end, which I believe this is the end. So
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, George. And I'd like to thank all of you for sharing these strategies that you developed and sharing these insights with our participants. And I think this is a great way of sharing everything we've done so far since the pandemic started. And I'm sure we have more stories, but hopefully we'll display those in the upcoming workshops. And you'll be receiving emails from us regarding those dates and times. So now the floor is open to the questions. Okay, who wants to go first? Do you have any questions? Hi, Eva, go ahead.
Hi, thank you all. I really appreciate hearing these so many good approaches for student engagement, connection with the students themselves, even though you're not seeing them in person. I think this is probably true of all pedagogy, but I'm looking at some of the techniques that you're using and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is so time consuming. This is our job. That's not the problem in principle. But I'm thinking of scheduling. So Shyla, I did some online, I did some oral exams, so I have a sense of how long that took me for my classes that were very scaffolded and I had longer things. But it was hard to find time for 60 students to do that, or 75, depending on how many sections you're teaching. Sylvia, the connection to check in, you're not seeing them. So to check in and follow up is a different kind of time. I'm like the queen of like sending too many remind emails or messages. So that's like, okay. But in terms of, and Jordy, I really love this reflection of what you're doing and in the context in which you're doing it. It seems to be a great mesh. Looking at AI and you're like, George was saying, oh, people are cheating. Let's look at this. And how can this be incorporated usefully? George, I have a question. So thank you all. Specifically to George, how long does it take you to evaluate 25 students' notes?
I wish it was 25 students.
Well, I'm just thinking like one class.
But
so I'm thinking like our classes generally have 20 to 32 students. So I'm saying for a class session, now that you've honed it and have been doing it for a few semesters, what is the process like for you?
It took me, when I was hand grading tests, it took me approximately the same amount of time. So it's I would say in a class, all of my basic electric classes this semester are 26 students. So 26 students,
3 times 4.
21 of them show up, and then who turns in what? It probably takes me a good 2 to 3 minutes per student. That's on the high side. It might be more like 1 to 2 minutes per student. I'm not scrutinizing everything. I'm not checking for spelling so much. I'm looking for the general ideas. A lot of the things that we do in automotive are very theoretical. There's a lot of science in this, and I want to make sure that they're understanding the principles behind it. So if they misspell a word, or if they have certain things out of, skewed, I can live with that. But I'm looking at the overall kind of value of what they're producing. Now, I could put 2 notes to you side by side. One person writes down every word that I say, little notes in the margins with little arrows pointing things and everything. And then you get one student that, the whole lecture, could have been 4 sentences. So there's varying degrees. But to sum it up, 1 to 2 minutes per student usually handles that.
Okay, that's very helpful. And it was also helpful to hear you say that you gave them examples of what you were looking for.
Oh yeah. No, the first example.
Correctness, I don't know if it also involved like how much detail you were looking for, but that's helpful.
No, the first example usually comes after the first upload. There's always that one student class that does awesome, and I block out their name and I put that up on the board. And there's always one that's not so good, and I block out their name and put that one up on the board and kind of compare the two. It's all anonymous. Nobody knows who I'm talking about, but it's very, very clear that this one was got 10 points and this one only got 3 points.
And if I may add to what George said, I completely agree with him. This is a lot of work that we've put into it, but this is a process. It's not just one day we woke up and then, hey, I'm going to spend 200 hours straight doing this. It's a process of learning. Nobody should look at themselves and say, hey, I need to be doing that tomorrow. Each one of us has shown a context of who we are not just as teachers, but as people, and what we care about. And that we're bringing that into the classroom. I would encourage everybody to really feel connected with their courses. And the last thing I'll say at a practical level, so that Shylak and Sylvia can chime in, is that I would strongly recommend what George is talking about, engaging students and making them feel connected to giving them feedback and making them feel connected to, helping them feel connected to the course and to their colleagues in their class, is really important early on. So if you start the ball rolling intensely early on in the semester, you can then, as you get overwhelmed, which we all do, back off a little bit from the feedback. It tends to have a very similar effect as if you were there every day, giving them feedback. So don't feel overwhelmed by how overwhelming this can be. It won't be that overwhelming if you can find a balance.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with giving the feedback because it makes them feel like they are part of the class, they're part of the discussions, and they feel connected. So we have Shaila, Sylvia, then Laura.
Oh, great. So just to talk about the time commitment, I do with the weekly check-ins, right? Which is for the very small class. It's only 2 credit hours, and to put in that much time is a lot, right? I mean, so the one word about scheduling is that because it's asynchronous, I put a Google Doc up, and the students sign into different times. So I turned that for myself as an office hour, where I would be doing work anyway. So all I have is the Zoom is on. I remember Elise saying that once, I think. The Zoom is on, and I'm just doing my workshop when you want. That's my office hour, right? So I have a set of students. So Monday, Tuesday, I think Monday and Wednesday, really. And then Fridays, I have some time blocked out. And I have some evening times blocked out when I normally do my homework, like catch up on things. So my Zoom is on, and the students just pop in. Sometimes they don't, right? I mean, they forget, they don't. So it doesn't matter. I'm not waiting for something. I'm doing my work. They pop in, and we do it. And if they don't come, then I tell them, okay, come next week. We'll do 2 weeks at once. So it's what we talk in new faculty seminar a lot. It's a lot of structured flexibility that happens, which is there's a structure, then but you're flexible, come in and do your stuff. So and I'm very and Jordy will tell you that I am very jealous of my time outside of work. So I safeguard it, and I tell Jordy to safeguard it every time I see him. It's like, Jordy, don't work too much. So I safeguard my time a lot. I actually keep track of the hours I work. And I'm comfortable with the number of hours I work. I won't tell you how many hours, but it's not more than 40. It's actually about 30. Anyway, but it's about 30 very effective hours. Beyond that, I'm not working because I need the time to think. I need the time to, ideas to percolate. I cannot be creative if I work, all the time. So I am very, and so it is like Jody says, it's a process. I will stop.
Yeah, I think it's a self-care, Shaila. It's very important. Self-care comes first. Sylvia?
And I will keep it very short because you said exactly what I was supposed to say, that exactly what was in my mind. But I remember that when I first came to BCC in 2017, a colleague told me the amount of time I spend teaching is really minimum. And the time that I spend the most is trying to work with students, get back to students, email students, chase students sometimes. And this is what I try to do, again, also with online classes. And I also do what you're doing. So I schedule students during my office hours, where normally students don't come. So I kind of force them to come. That's the trick there. And again, I see other hands, so I want to stop talking.
Thank you. Laura?
Yes, thank you so much. So first I wanted to say that this was really wonderful and helpful. I was taking notes and listening to what all of you were saying. Some of the questions that I had, you already responded in your clarifications. So I guess I do have like a little question then left for Sylvia. And I was curious about how you use those wikis and the videos where your students post them. I don't know if you can show us or maybe just stop.
Wikis are a sort of collaborative writing, right? So, for example, I ask a general question and I get students add in information. So it could be as simple as a list of questions. So, for example, we are talking about a very basic chapter 1. We know how to ask questions. So write down all the questions that you can think of without repeating those of the others. And if you find mistakes on other people, try to correct them. Or you can go even deeper into let's write a story together, no, and using all the tenses that you want. So every student has to write a line or a sentence in a story. This is in terms of wiki. So videos posting, I post my videos. That's actually something that I'm still struggling with, having students post their videos. They send them to, it's not available on Blackboard. That's what I've been told. So they post it to me, they give it to me, and then I post them online for everybody. But it would be great if we had the tool. Maybe with the new system that will come, we will have that. But no, they cannot post for everybody. They can only post for their group, for example. If they work in groups, yes, they can post videos to each other. But they cannot post them for everybody.
So they send them to you and you then post. I see. Thank you.
But I'm thinking of other solutions. So if I come
Let
up
us
with
know when
something, I
you-
will let you know.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia and Laura. Mervyn is next, and Natalia.
Hi, and thank you all for wonderful information here. Great ideas. From weekly checkups and every class checkups to artificial intelligence, as Jordi did, which actually is applicable to pretty much all of these fields, whatever we are teaching. I do have a question for Shaila. However, Shaila, you said you are using oral exams as part of the summative assessment for your lectures. How have you structured that for your labs? Are you do you have anything different for labs? Like, are you also using oral exams in labs as summative assessment, or are you doing something else?
Oh, I have not so far used them for labs, no, because our labs are nowadays in our department, especially if we're doing online, our labs are in face-to-face. So what I did was to convert some of these questions, I turned it into I started making I'm starting to make the students do essay questions on in lab. So I give it to them in advance and tell them, you're going to explain this, and this to me. I give them the questions and I give them the answers, and I tell them, prepare these because these are some things you need to know. And I think as far as the oral exams, Mervyn, it's focusing on the fundamentals and then seeing if they understood the concept, and then seeing if they can think on their feet. So there's one or two questions where they think on their feet. So the way I schedule it was in an online class. It is a time commitment. However, since it's asynchronous, I'm not showing up for 3 hours on an exam anyway. I'm not. So I use those kinds of times for the exam. So it works out. I mean, I might do it over 2 weeks. So students come in and take. One thing about the oral exam, because it's mastery learning, they get multiple attempts to take the exam. So if they come to the oral exam, they're not ready, and they clearly don't know what they're talking about, I tell them, don't do it. Come back another day. I mean, when you're ready. Because I actually had one student who was brilliant, helped all the other students in class all the time. I like George's, the daily thing, right? So every time we had a discussion, he was always there helping everyone. And on the day of the exam, he bombed it completely because he had not slept for 3 days because his, personal stuff. And he just sounded completely different, like his normal self. I said, are you okay? He said, no, I haven't slept for 3 days, but I thought I should do this exam because we scheduled it. I said, no, come back another day because I know this is not you. So you have that time with an oral exam. They can come back and take it another time. And he was perfect. He was himself. So yeah, so there is that. Again, the structured flexibility is possible with the oral exam. If you want to know more about the oral exam, I just published a paper on my oral exam. It just came out, so I can put it in the chat or somewhere, and I send it to Seher, and she can, when you do you can send it to her. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. One more just comment before I hand it over to Natalia, and that is, Sylvia, you asked something about kind of using something that is kind of multidisciplinary for your class. You probably could show them a figure from biological sciences, something, and then ask them to translate it into Italian. Let's say, a part of the anatomy or
Mhm.
something just to integrate and then just have more fun and then kind of maybe you already have something like that
No,
as
that's a good
part of your
idea.
curriculum. Yeah,
Yeah.
but you can like to make a diagram or to label something and use like a Pictionary in a way, like a
Yeah.
dictionary with, yeah, Italian. I think that would be fun for your students to do.
Yes, thank you.
be-
Video compositions or image compositions is another tool that I'm using, but this is interesting. Thank you.
Before the
You're welcome.
pandemic started, we were discussing the interdisciplinary projects. Remember, some of
Yeah.
you were serving on the assessment council around that time. So unfortunately, when the pandemic hit, we had to stop working on that. But maybe we could bring that discussion back to life and start having projects, interdisciplinary projects among faculty, because it's a big thing nowadays in CUNY. They've been picking up interdisciplinary projects, and they're giving out a lot of grants for interdisciplinary projects as well. So maybe we could start talking about it. All right, our last question is from Natalia, because we already passed our time.
Yeah,
Natalia?
I'll try to be fast, but hi, everybody. So the technical question, how do you force students to come to one-to-one meetings, for an oral exam? Did I understand it correctly, Shaila, that you were teaching online asynchronous? Because they are usually not mandated, like I cannot force it on them. How do you force it on them?
The thing is that the funny thing, the weekly check-in, you mean, right? Or the oral,
yes,
the weekly check-in. The weekly check-in, it's funny because I sort of said this is the policy of the class and it's included in the grade. It's a small part of the grade, but it's at their time. I said I'll give them a number of time slots for them to come in. In fact, I'm still playing with this, like Jordy's playing with the AI idea. I'm playing with this particular class because it's such a small class. I mean, in terms of like number of credit hours. So what I'm doing is I told the students that up to midterm, I'm going to keep doing these weekly check-ins. But if I'll look at your midterm oral exam grade, and after that, I'm going to tell some of the students that you don't need to come in. For the weekly check-ins. So those who need help can come. I will tell, okay, if you got this grade in the oral and you've been okay, you're fine. Again, as Jordy said, in the beginning, you're a little bit intense. You tell them, come for this, come for that, come for that. Then you can tell them, listen, we can ease off. You don't have to come to the weekly check-in if you've done this well. If you're doing this well and you're okay on your own. Funnily enough, when I mentioned it to the students, I said, after the midterm, some of them said, we like coming. Okay. So I think I did a survey for one of the previous classes, and I said, how did you like the weekly check-in? And 100% of the students said they like the weekly check-in. They said it keeps us on task. We like coming to the weekly check-in. So it's kind of interesting. I was surprised, actually. I thought it was a chore, but they like coming in.
Got it. Thank you so much.
I was going to ask you if you have any pushback, but you said 100% of them like the check-ins. Interesting. Very nice. Thank you so much again. I know we passed our time by almost 8 minutes. I'm going to make an announcement for the upcoming workshops. The next one is going to be October 27, and it's going to be about designing assignments and exams for online modalities. Most likely, we're going to turn this into an online event as well. And so our speakers will be Carlos Diachkovitsky, Laura Broughton, Natalia Novak, and again, Shaila Akaraju. And our last one is scheduled on December 8th. This is about using formative and summative assessment for online teaching versus in-person teaching. And our distinguished speakers will be Teresa Smalek, Monique Guichard, Elise Grotodoria, David Puglia, Joe Donica, Shaila Akaraj, and Jordy Getman. So you'll be receiving information about our upcoming events. And again, thank you so much for joining and participating and asking questions. So we'd love to see you participating in the upcoming months as well. Thank you so much. Yes, go ahead.
Can I suggest that everybody that's on this list, we can send you, I'm very happy to field any more questions by email. And I will share my PowerPoint with the group. So please, maybe we can have a repository of some of the presentations.
I was
because-
thinking about the same thing. We already have the repository that Ray put together, the link. Maybe we could make it available.
Yeah, we'll put, maybe we'll put a link on the website
Yes,
with the information. It'll be on SharePoint
yes.
so that you could get to it.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have it on the like monthly basis. Whoever presented can upload their presentations, then we can have a link on the website.
Oh, is
Yes,
it
go ahead.
possible to do like an e-portfolio or something like that, or something for this group? Because I had so many things I was commenting, I was making notes on Sylvia's and Jordy's and George's presentations. I would like to like put those thoughts somewhere that you know that they can see it and everyone can see it, so everyone can do the same. Like Jordy said, you know, our like comments and things that we've learned. I mean, it's amazing stuff that I just wrote stuff, but I would like to put it
Sure,
somewhere everyone
sure.
can see it. And I would
Definitely.
like to see what everybody else is going through, everyone else's minds. There's lots
Yes,
of great
I have
minds
so
here. I
much
want
to
hear
say.
from
Yeah,
everyone.
I also have a lot of comments and so much to say, but I do not want to take up anybody else's time. So we can talk about those or include those in the e-portfolio or any other platform that we may come up with. That's a good idea. Thank you so
I'm
much.
happy to help put that together, by the way.
Yes,
So-
I was going to ask you, I'm going to need some help with e-portfolio. I'm not really good at e-portfolio if we go around that route, or Ray might have another suggestion, so we'll talk about it. All right, thank you so much, and we hope to see you in the next events, and enjoy your
Take
weekend.
care.
Thank
Stay
you.
dry.
Thank you, Ray and Seher.
Stay
Thank you.
dry.
Hey,
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you all.
Bye.